Usually when you are handed, like a medical diagnosis, there's this fundamental expectation of precision. It's almost like mechanical engineering, you know?
Right, yeah, it's totally binary, broken or not broken.
Exactly. You fall, you break your arm, and they slide you right into an X-ray machine. And the doctor just points to a screen and says, look, right there.
You literally see the jagged white line across the humerus. It's completely undeniable.
Undeniable. It's clean, right? You
Yeah.
cast it, you heal it, and you move on. But then you step out of the hospital and into the world of human psychology. You step into modern digital culture.
Yeah, that's where the X-ray machine becomes totally useless.
Utterly useless.
Yeah.
Because you start looking at our collective spiritual health, and suddenly that diagnostic landscape today is just terrifyingly murky.
Oh, absolutely. The symptoms are literally everywhere, but the fracture itself isn't visible.
Right. You can't just point to a jagged white line on a screen to explain why an entire generation feels like completely hollowed out.
No, you really can't. I mean, we are looking at widespread anxiety, political radicalization, this bizarre cultural obsession with meaningless entertainment.
Yeah.
But diagnosing the root cause, that requires us to look past the surface level inflammation.
And that is exactly what we are doing today. So, welcome to the Morning Roundup. Our mission on this show is to take the absolute mountain of source material published today, from geopolitical analysis and cultural critiques to theological sermons and deep dives into ancient history, and extract the actual signal from the noise.
Right. We aren't just like giving you a reading list.
No, no. We are threading these seemingly disconnected ideas together to show you the hidden architecture of the world you're walking through every day.
And as we ran all of today's sources through the filter, this undeniable, frankly alarming, overarching theme emerged.
Yeah, it was wild to see it all line up. We are calling it the battle for your attention and the demise of the ego.
Because we are dissecting exactly how modern systems are explicitly engineered to capture your ego.
Yes. They lock you into these invisible feedback loops that just leave you miserable, agitated, and entirely numb.
But the good news is the sources also provide the escape hatch.
They do. So, by the end of this deep dive, you're going to understand why pretending to be an absolute fool might be the most brilliant tactical move you can make today.
Right.
And why, strangely enough, Baby Yoda is a flawless symptom of modern civilizational decay.
Honestly, I can't wait to get to the Baby Yoda part. But to find the fracture, we really have to start at the anatomical root of the problem.
Yeah, let's start there.
We have a really profound source today. It's a sermon from Father Moses detailing the mechanics of human misery. And he places the blame squarely, unapologetically, on the ego.
But, you know, he doesn't define the ego the way pop psychology does, right?
No, not at all.
Because when we hear ego, we usually picture, like, the arrogant guy at the gym flexing in the mirror.
Right, just pure vanity.
Exactly. But Father Moses takes it so much deeper. The ego isn't just vanity. It is an obsession with control.
That is the crucial distinction right there. The ego operates under this quiet, desperate delusion that we can and should play God over our own circumstances.
Wow. Yeah.
It demands that the world conform to its expectations. Just think about the mechanical reality of your day. You hit traffic when you were running late.
Ugh, the worst.
Or your boss sends a slightly ambiguous, passive-aggressive email, or your flight gets delayed.
Right. And what happens? The ego immediately flares up. It rejects the reality of the discomfort. It literally screams, this shouldn't be happening to me.
Exactly. Why me?
And that rejection of reality produces a very specific exhaust fume, which is anxiety.
Yes, the anxiety is just the byproduct.
When the ego realizes it isn't actually in control of the universe, it panics. It becomes argumentative. It demands to be right constantly. It just cannot suffer the slightest discomfort or slight to its perceived status.
And to offset that constant, grinding spiritual noise, society offers a very convenient, highly profitable solution, which is distraction. Because sitting in silence with an inflamed ego is just unbearable, so we chase hedonism.
We try to pump our nervous systems full of dopamine, pleasure, constant stimulation, just to drown out the disquiet in our own souls.
But Father Moses offers an alternative. He points to the historical goal of the Orthodox Christian, which is acquiring what they call the peace of the Holy Spirit.
Right, and he references this really famous historical encounter in the Russian woods between Saint Seraphim of Sarov and a man named Motov.
Oh, this is a great story.
Yeah, Saint Seraphim asks him how he feels, and Motov describes this profound, unshakable, tremendous peace. But the key here is the mechanism of that peace.
It isn't achieved by manipulating your circumstances so that nothing bad ever happens to you.
No. It is achieved by the active, intentional destruction of the ego.
Right, because if the ego is dead, it can no longer be offended by traffic or insults or delayed flights.
Exactly. The peace actually transcends the circumstances.
Oh. But if you refuse to kill the ego, you are left to constantly feed it. And humanity has just spent the last, few decades building the most efficient, hypercaloric, ego-feeding trough in the history of the world.
The internet.
The internet. Which brings us perfectly to the cultural analysis provided by Paul Vanderklay today.
Yeah, this was a fantastic source. He introduces a concept that everyone listening to this really needs to internalize. He calls it internet hygiene.
And Vanderklay points out a really dangerous assumption we make, particularly with Gen Z.
We assume that because young people are, digital natives, because they grew up swiping iPads before they could walk, that they actually understand the digital landscape.
Right, but being born in a casino doesn't mean you understand how the house odds are rigged against you.
Oh, that is a perfect way to conceptualize it. People are engaging in an arena they fundamentally misunderstand.
Vanderklay focuses heavily on this psychological mechanism of attention capture.
Let's break that down, because attention capture isn't just like getting distracted by a push notification.
No, it's way more insidious than that. Attention capture is the psychological tipping point, where a human being begins to subconsciously believe that the frame of their screen is ultimate reality.
So the whole horizon shrinks to a 6-inch piece of glass.
Exactly. And the feedback you receive on that screen, the likes, the outrage, the comments, it begins to completely overwrite your physical, lived reality.
He gives the ultimate tragic embodiment of this, the phenomenon of the lolcow.
Oh man, this is so dark.
It really is. For those lucky enough not to know this term, Vanderklay references internet figures like Boogie2988 or Wings of Redemption. These are real human beings who have become completely financially and psychologically captured by their internet personas.
Well, let's look at the actual mechanics of the lolcow ecosystem, because it is a symbiotic loop of spiritual decay.
Okay. Yeah.
So you have an individual who starts posting online for attention. They get a taste of algorithmic virality, which usually comes from drama or self-deprecation.
Right. The ego gets hooked on the attention, and then they monetize it.
But the internet is a fickle beast. It requires constantly escalating stakes. To maintain the financial flow and the attention, the lolcow has to continually degrade themselves.
It's a literal blood sport.
Yeah.
And the audience develops a deeply unhealthy parasocial relationship with them. I mean, why do millions of people tune in to watch a man slowly destroy his life, his health, and his dignity on camera?
Because it soothes the audience's ego.
Exactly. The viewer gets to sit at their computer, look at this spiraling lolcow, and think, well, my life might be a mess, but at least I'm not that guy.
Right. The lolcow is the human ego stripped of all dignity and monetized for the amusement of millions of other fragile egos.
And the creator leans into the public humiliation to survive financially, which breeds profound clinical depression, which makes them act out more drastically, drawing a larger, more cruel audience.
It's a death spiral. There are entire cottage industries, reaction channels, clipping channels, whose sole economic model is mocking these specific individuals.
Which brings up clip culture, right? Vanderklay specifically talks about this. It's an environment where context is entirely stripped away.
Oh, yeah. People take a 4-second clip out of a 3-hour conversation just to create a political or social hit piece.
Oh, it has absolutely nothing to do with seeking truth. It is purely about making yourself salient as a target. You basically jump up and down waving a flag until a bigger creator takes a bite out of you. And the fallout in real life is often catastrophic.
But wait, hold on though. Are we just letting human nature off the hook here?
What do you mean?
Is the internet actually generating this toxicity, or is it just a high-tech magnifying glass for the exact spiritual sickness Father Moses was talking about? I mean, humans have been attending public executions and gladiator games for millennia.
That is the core question. Is it the tool or the user?
Yeah.
I think the analysis suggests it is both, locked in this lethal embrace.
Right.
The internet doesn't invent the sickness of the ego, but it perfectly weaponizes it. The ego wants to be seen and affirmed without having to do the hard work of actual character building.
And the algorithmic machine of the internet recognizes that exact vulnerability and exploits it for profit.
It totally removes the physical friction of society. Like if you act like a jerk at a local pub, you get punched in the face. You learn a lesson.
Yeah, there are immediate consequences.
But if you act like a jerk online, you go viral and get a brand deal. The system rewards the sickness.
which means engaging with this system requires an entirely new set of defensive tactics.
Yes.
If the internet and modern culture demand that we constantly project our ego, our status, and our supposed intelligence for attention, then the ultimate act of rebellion is to do the exact opposite.
Oh, let's transition right there, because if projecting your intellect is a trap, how do you actually navigate the world? We pull heavily here from an analysis by the Academy of Ideas on the power of the mask, combined with a really stark look at modern schooling from St. Nectarius Orthodox Church.
The Academy of Ideas brings up a deeply uncomfortable truth about human nature. We live in a society that encourages you to flaunt everything: your wealth, your beauty, your hot takes.
Yeah, everything is on display.
But historically, those who possess true wisdom or intelligence are incredibly careful to conceal it.
And the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer laid out the exact psychological mechanism for this. He pointed out that openly displaying your intelligence or discernment is actually perceived as an act of aggression.
Wait, aggression? How?
Because by demonstrating superior wisdom, you are indirectly reproaching everyone else in the room for being dull.
Wow. Okay, yeah, it offends by its very existence.
Exactly. Just think about the workplace. Most people, deep down, derive their foundational sense of self-worth from the belief that they are intellectually competent.
Sure.
So when a junior employee comes into a meeting and just effortlessly exposes the flawed logic of the CEO's new strategy, the CEO doesn't feel gratitude for the truth.
No, the CEO feels their vanity wounded. Feelings of inferiority are awakened.
And when an ego is wounded, it doesn't seek self-improvement. It seeks vengeance.
The resentment is immediate. So the strategy here, which is heavily advocated by thinkers like Balthasar Gracian and Montesquieu, is strategic foolishness.
Strategic foolishness.
You must appear like a fool, but be entirely wise. You don't actually become ignorant, you just construct a facade of harmlessness.
Nietzsche referred to mediocrity as the happiest mask. The superior mind wears the mask of mediocrity so as not to irritate the fragile egos of the majority.
It is an act of deep strategic self-preservation, but arguably also an act of pity, right?
How so?
Well, you realize that exposing people to their own ignorance will only break them, so you just nod along, smile, and keep your truth hidden.
The historical case study for what happens when you refuse to wear the mask is Socrates. The oracle at Delphi declared Socrates the wisest man in all of Athens. And why? Because Socrates was the only man who fundamentally grasped his own limitations.
He famously said, "I know that I have no wisdom, small or great."
Right. But Socrates made a massive tactical error in how he applied that wisdom. He didn't just sit quietly with his humility.
No, he went into the public square and began utilizing the Socratic method on politicians, renowned poets, craftsmen.
He asked them basic, piercing questions that systematically deconstructed their worldviews, exposing the fact that the elites of Athens were actually entirely ignorant.
And what was the mechanism of their response? Did they thank him for the Enlightenment?
Oh, absolutely not. They charged him with corrupting the youth and sentenced him to death by drinking hemlock. Society will literally kill you before it allows you to continuously expose its intellectual mediocrity.
But here's the massive caveat, and where our source from St. Nectarios comes in. The ancient strategy was to hide your profound education behind a mask of foolishness in public.
Right.
Our modern crisis is that we are wearing the mask in public, but we are genuinely ignorant in private. We have abandoned the pursuit of truth entirely.
Man, that hits hard. The speaker from St. Nectarios draws a fascinating distinction between modern schooling and historical education. He argues that the modern schooling apparatus, the industrialized system we all went through, is largely rooted in a Marxist framework of conformity.
Right. The underlying goal isn't to create free-thinking philosophers. It's to get an entire population to adopt one standardized mindset.
To respond to the same bells, stand in the same lines, and produce compliant workers for an industrial machine.
He contrasts this with the 1828 Webster's Dictionary definition of education. Back then, education was understood as this holistic endeavor encompassing manners, the arts, the hard sciences, and crucially, religion.
Yeah, the dictionary explicitly stated that a religious education was indispensable. You needed a theological anchor to make sense of the arts and sciences.
Because we have stripped that anchor away, we are facing an absolute epidemic of ignorance. The speaker points out that modern believers haven't even read their foundational texts. They don't know basic church history.
We literally have the collective wisdom of 2,000 years of human grappling with the divine available for free on our smartphones. And what do we do with it?
We use those devices for doom scrolling and phubbing.
I love that word, fubbing. It's when you are sitting at a dinner table with your spouse and you snub them by staring at your phone. You are fubbing.
It sounds funny, but the spiritual consequences are catastrophic. The speaker references the prophet Isaiah, who said, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge."
Not a lack of data, not a lack of Google search results, a lack of foundational character-forming knowledge.
So picture a stealth fighter jet.
Okay, I like where this is going.
The whole point of the stealth jet is to fly under the radar, undetected by the enemy's defense systems. That's the mask of mediocrity. We aren't trying to trigger everyone's ego defense systems,
Right.
but a stealth jet is entirely useless if it isn't carrying a payload. You had to carry this massive internal arsenal of rigorous, classical theological education.
But wait, if you never open the bomb bay doors, if you just fly around hiding forever, don't you have a duty to drop the truth at some point? How do we balance strategic foolishness with the moral imperative to fight ignorance?
The key to the stealth bomber analogy is target acquisition. You don't drop your payload on every radar blip.
No.
You don't engage in Twitter wars with anonymous trolls. You don't try to dismantle your uncle's political views at Thanksgiving when you know his ego is entirely wrapped up in them.
Right, because that just triggers the defense systems.
Exactly. Strategic foolishness protects the truth from swine. You educate yourself ruthlessly in private so that when you finally encounter a target of opportunity, someone genuinely humbled, someone whose ego is broken and is actually desperate for the truth, you have a profound payload to deliver.
And when a society fundamentally fails to load that internal payload, when we trade rigorous education for doom-scrolling and algorithmic validation, it creates a massive cultural vacuum.
And nature abhors a vacuum, and so does culture.
Yes. When you lose the profound, you replace it with the plastic. Which brings us perfectly to our sources analyzing modern entertainment and generational nihilism.
We have a deep dive from a creator named Master Samwise, offering a scathing critique of the upcoming Mandalorian and Grogu movie.
And look, while it might seem trivial to pivot from ancient philosophy to Star Wars, his analysis perfectly diagnoses the hollowness of our cultural moment.
Oh, he didn't pull any punches. He called the film aggressively generic, bland, and boring. He said it felt like a studio took 2 mediocre television episodes, compressed them, and shoved them into theaters without any artistic spine or vision whatsoever.
But the mechanical details of his critique are what really matter. He points out how the writers fundamentally break their own world building because they lack the literary education to write outside their own narrow reality.
For instance, there is a scene where the Mandalorian captures an Imperial officer who has turned into a mob boss. The officer looks at his captors and demands a lawyer.
It is so jarring. Samwise rightfully points out that demanding a lawyer is dialogue for a procedural cop show set in Baltimore, not a sweeping space opera set in a galaxy far, far away.
Right, it shatters the diegesis. It proves the writers aren't imagining a new world, they're just projecting their 21st century mundane vernacular onto aliens.
Furthermore, the world building is sanitized to protect the corporate investment. The film aggressively maintains a PG rating, which eliminates any real stakes.
Yeah, in one sequence, beasts described as the deadliest monsters in the galaxy are unleashed into a crowded spaceport. But instead of acting like vicious predators, they literally just pick people up and gently toss them over their shoulders.
No one dies. There's no actual threat. It's totally toothless.
And then there is the mascot himself, Baby Yoda or Grogu. Samwise highlights the staggering narrative inconsistencies that prove Grogu isn't a character, he's just a merchandising prop.
In the first season of the show, this creature uses the Force to lift a giant space rhino that weighs thousands of pounds. Now, in a feature film, he supposedly struggles to slide a bowl of chips across a table.
It makes no sense. Beyond the power inconsistency, there is the biological timeline. Yoda lived to be 900 years old, Grogu is 50.
Right.
In human years, he is roughly the equivalent of a 5-year-old child. Why is he still acting like a nonverbal infant? Why isn't he speaking?
Because an infant is cuter. An infant sells more plush toys. The studio refuses to allow the character to develop because development implies change, and change threatens the merchandising revenue.
The ultimate point Samwise makes is that the film refuses to engage with any deeper thematic resonance. The setting is supposed to be this fascinating geopolitical struggle between a fledgling new republic and the desperate, cornered remnants of a fascist empire.
There are massive themes of power, governance, and justice to explore there.
But the movie ignores all of it. It's just stuff happening. It is a 2-hour flashing light designed to flood dopamine receptors.
Samwise even argues that the much-maligned prequel trilogy at least attempted to tell a story with complex political themes. This new era is just empty consumption.
Which perfectly intersects with Paul Vanderklay's analysis of video games and generational nihilism. Vanderklay discusses the concept of flow machines.
Flow machines. I really love this
A
concept.
flow machine is a system engineered to manipulate a human into a continuous behavioral loop. Video games are the ultimate flow machines. Now, Vanderklay acknowledges that games can be profound ludonarrative art. They can tell incredible stories.
Sure.
But the vast majority operate purely as anesthetic flow machines.
And he uses this to highlight a massive generational shift. He looks at the boomer generation versus Gen Z. When boomers were young and dissatisfied with the world, they were loud.
Right, they protested, they marched in the streets.
But Gen Z's dissent looks entirely different. They don't march. They engage in quiet quitting, or they adopt extreme, paralyzing nihilism.
The mechanism behind this shift is crucial. Protesting requires a foundational belief that the system is malleable, that if you yell loud enough, the levers of power will shift.
Gen Z, by and large, believes the system is fundamentally rigged and unchangeable. Economic mobility feels impossible. Political institutions feel completely corrupt.
So, when the real world offers zero upward mobility and zero spiritual meaning, checking out isn't just lazy. From their perspective, it is a highly rational preservation tactic.
But wait, let me jump in here. Are we expecting too much from our pop culture?
What do you mean?
Are we really sitting here demanding that a Disney space western carry the philosophical weight of Dostoevsky or ancient scripture? Isn't the fact that a grown man is making a passionate video essay complaining about a space puppet actually the problem? Are we just looking for God in a Disney movie?
That is the exact paradox we are trapped in. When a society hollows out the institutions that historically provided profound meaning, the church, classical education, deep community bonds, that innate human hunger for meaning doesn't just disappear.
We project it onto whatever is left. We project it onto our superhero franchises, our video games, and our space operas. We demand that these corporate products serve as our modern mythology.
And because they're just corporate products built in boardrooms to sell toys, they inevitably fail to bear that spiritual weight. And when they fail, we feel this crushing, nihilistic despair.
We are starving for a Michelin star meal, eating a plastic toy hamburger, and getting furiously angry that we lack nutrition.
And when entertainment fails to provide that anchor, people don't just sit in the void forever. They turn to rigid, often destructive political and social ideologies to give them a sense of purpose.
Which brings us to the geopolitical and ideological frameworks we pulled from today's sources. And I want to be incredibly clear with you, the listener, before we dive into this. Our goal here is not to take a side.
No, absolutely not.
We are strictly unpacking the analytical frameworks presented by these sources to understand how these different groups operate. So whatever your politics are, just listen to the claims being made here.
Let's start with the analysis from Base Camp with Simone and Malcolm Collins. They tackle one of the most confusing political dynamics in the modern era, the alliance between woke progressive leftists and radical Islamist movements.
On paper, this alliance makes absolutely zero sense. You have a progressive movement that champions LGBTQ rights, feminism, and secularism, aligning itself with fundamentalist movements that enforce strict Sharia law.
Which explicitly criminalizes and oppresses those exact groups.
Right. The Collinses point to historical precedents like the Iranian Revolution, where left-wing Marxists actually helped the Ayatollah overthrow the Shah, only to be systematically executed by the newly installed theocratic regime the moment the revolution succeeded.
The analytical framework the Collinses present to explain this paradox suggests that the progressive elite do not actually care about implementing their stated social or economic policies.
Because if they did, the alliance would be impossible.
Exactly. Instead, their primary unifying directive is the deconstruction and destruction of the current civilizational system, specifically Western civilization and its capitalist frameworks.
They operate purely through a binary lens of oppressor versus oppressed. In their framework, Western civilization is the ultimate oppressor, making anyone who opposes it a de facto ally.
The Collinses use a fascinating analogy, comparing progressives to muggles in Harry Potter who are magically blinded to the reality in front of them.
They suffer from an intentional ideological blindness regarding the secondary harms of their alliances. They literally cannot process the contradiction because their entire ego and worldview are wrapped up in the act of dismantling the quote-unquote oppressor.
Pivoting to a different ideological collapse, we have Matt Fradd and Michael Jones analyzing the rapid decline of the new atheism movement.
If you were on the internet 10 or 15 years ago, you remember the Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens era. It was literally everywhere.
Oh yeah. The new atheism movement promised to usher in a utopian age of pure science and reason, finally leaving ancient superstitions behind. But according to this analysis, it ultimately delivered nothing but hedonism and a pathway to the very nihilism we were just discussing with Gen Z.
The mechanical failure of new atheism is that it only provided a hammer. It was a brilliantly designed tool for smashing other people's worldviews and pointing out hypocrisy.
But you can only smash statues for so long before your arm gets tired.
Right. You look around, you are standing in a pile of rubble, and you realize you have built absolutely no culture, no community, and no teleological purpose for why human beings should get out of bed in the morning. Pure reason without purpose leads directly to the void.
Fradd and Jones contrast this purely deconstructive approach with the historical robustness of Christian apologetics. They delve into the historical arguments for the resurrection, noting specific countercultural details.
Like the fact that the primary witnesses to the empty tomb were women. In a first-century patriarchal society where the testimony of women was not legally valued, inventing a myth relying on their testimony would be a terrible strategic move.
They argue this points to historical authenticity, contrasting it with what they claim are internal contradictions within Islam, such as the theological divide between Shia and Sunni, or the assertion that the Quran confirms earlier Jewish and Christian scriptures while simultaneously contradicting their core tenets.
Finally, we examine the framework of neoconservative politics through the lens of Oran McIntyre. He analyzes the recent neoconservative panic over the possibility that Donald Trump might actually avoid a regime change ground war with Iran.
McIntyre's framework suggests that neoconservative figures operate on a mechanism of perpetual foreign intervention. They supported Trump only when they believed they could manipulate his administration into a hawkish, aggressive posture in the Middle East.
The moment peace, or at least a de-escalation with Iran, seemed viable, these figures immediately turned on him. Their ideological survival depends on having an enemy to fight.
McIntyre also introduces a deeply concerning concept regarding U.S. foreign policy: diaspora politics.
He argues that American statecraft is no longer driven by a unified calculation of national interest. Instead, it is heavily manipulated by the domestic lobbying of various ethnic and cultural diasporas living within the U.S.
He uses Senator Marco Rubio's recent trip to India as a prime example of the weakness this creates. During the trip, Rubio was asked a question predicated on the assumption that Americans are inherently racist.
Instead of rejecting the premise and defending the nation, Rubio offered a weak appeasement, essentially saying, well, there are stupid people everywhere.
McIntyre argues that when leaders accept the hostile framing of foreign nations or domestic diasporas, it projects a fatal weakness on the global stage.
And just to inject a little absurdity into all this heavy geopolitics, we looked at a satirical video from Awaken with JP.
Oh, this was brilliant.
Yeah, he does this bit where he sarcastically packs his bags for his next sponsored influencer trip to Israel. He completely skewers the highly managed, performative nature of modern geopolitical support, where global conflicts are reduced to content opportunities for Instagram influencers to boost their engagement metrics.
When you look at all these frameworks subjectively, the woke Islamist alliance, the new atheists, the neoconservatives, a glaring pattern emerges.
Exactly. This is what I wanted to pull together. We're just looking at massive, collective manifestations of the exact same ego Father Moses warned us about in the very first source.
Yes, every single one of these ideologies is entirely reactive. They define themselves exclusively by what they are against.
The progressive needs the oppressor. The atheist needs the fundamentalist. The neocon needs the foreign dictator. If an ideology is built purely on deconstructing an enemy, it inevitably collapses on itself because it has no foundational anchor. Just noise fighting noise.
So, if the internet captures our attention, our entertainment feeds us plastic, and our political ideologies are just massive, warring egos, how do we actually build an anchor? How do we survive this?
We have to look backward. We have to look at ancient history and the strict personal disciplines that sustained humanity before the digital age.
We begin with a profound linguistic and theological insight from Tyler Burdett and the late Dr. Michael S. Heiser. Burdett breaks down the book of Hosea, where God files what is known in Hebrew as a redaim, a formal covenant lawsuit against the nation of Israel.
The context here is that Israel had fallen into idolatry. Specifically, they were worshiping Baal, the Canaanite god of storms and fertility.
They were experiencing agricultural success, and instead of attributing it to God, they were giving the credit to Baal.
So God issues this lawsuit, and Hosea delivers the famous line, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge."
But Burdett points out that the English translation loses the crucial mechanics of the Hebrew text. The Hebrew word for knowledge used there is yada.
And yada does not mean data collection. It doesn't mean passing a written theology exam.
Precisely. Yada implies deep, relational, intimate knowledge. You can memorize the entire Bible, know all the historical dates, and still be in a spiritual freefall if you lack yada.
Hosea's own life was a visceral, painful demonstration of this. God commanded Hosea to marry a prostitute, Gomer. Hosea continually redeems her, buys her back, and loves her despite her constant betrayal.
It wasn't just a metaphor, it was a physical manifestation of the broken, agonizing reality of a breached relationship.
Dr. Heiser expands on this messy, relational complexity when discussing how we view the Bible itself. Many people have this sterile view of divine inspiration, where they picture God dictating the Bible word for word to a human holding a quill, like a robot.
Heiser shatters that. He points to Ezekiel chapter 1, where the text abruptly and awkwardly shifts back and forth between first person I saw and third person he saw pronouns.
Heiser argues that these textual anomalies prove the Bible is a complex relational document produced through the messy cooperation of divine intent and human limitation. It requires deep relational wrestling to understand, not just passive reading.
And historically, the church understood how to wrestle with the truth collectively. We have sources from Benjamin John and St. Nectarios discussing the concept of church councils. They point to the first ecumenical council in Nicaea.
The mechanism of this council is fascinating. You had a priest named Arius, whose ego convinced him that his personal, hyper-rational interpretation of theology was superior to the historical tradition.
He began teaching that Jesus was a created being, not eternal. He had a catchy slogan, "There was a time when the Son was not." It was a massive, disruptive heresy.
It's the ego striking again. Arius thought he was the smartest guy in the room. But how did the church respond? Emperor Constantine convened a council, and 318 bishops traveled from across the known world.
Many of these men bore the physical scars of Roman torture. They gathered together, unified their understanding, and successfully defeated Arianism.
The speaker from St. Nectarios makes a brilliant point. It is incredibly easy for the devil to deceive one isolated man with an inflated ego. It is nearly impossible to deceive 318 bishops gathered in fasting, prayer, and historical submission.
Benjamin John takes this framework and applies it to a much later, highly debated event, the Council of Florence. He argues forcefully that by every objective historical metric, Florence was a valid, binding, ecumenical council.
It possessed all the necessary components. The presence of the Pope, the Emperor, the Eastern Patriarchs, and it concluded with massive, near-unanimous signatures. Only 2 figures held out.
John argues that modern detractors who try to invalidate Florence are constantly shifting the goalposts, relying on arbitrary post hoc criteria rather than accepting the difficult reality of historical collective unity.
The overarching lesson here is that surviving the noise requires submitting your individual ego to a broader historical relational truth. But how do we actually do that on a Tuesday morning before we commute to work? How do we implement this?
That is where Dr. Jordan B. Cooper comes in. He provides an intensely practical survival guide, the 5 spiritual disciplines to survive the modern world. This is the ultimate internet hygiene protocol for the human soul.
I want everyone listening to, literally write these down. Discipline number 1, meditation. And let's be clear, this is not the Eastern concept of emptying your mind to become a void.
Christian meditation is the active process of sitting with the truth and chewing on it. Cooper uses a phenomenal analogy. Imagine paying a fortune to dine at a world-renowned Michelin star restaurant.
Right.
The waiter brings out a culinary masterpiece, and you just grab it with your hands, shove it into your face in 3 seconds, and run out the door.
It would be an insult to the chef. But that is exactly how modern Christians consume Scripture. They treat it like a daily checklist. They read a chapter in 3 minutes just to say they did it.
Meditation is the slow, deliberate savoring of the text. It rewires your brain's fragmented attention span.
Discipline number 2, consecration.
Right.
This is the act of deliberately dedicating your morning and evening to God through prayer.
In the ancient world, Israel offered daily sacrifices at the temple morning and evening, like clockwork.
Consecration is the modern equivalent. It forces you to frame your waking moment and your sleeping moment in total humility. It is a daily reminder that the universe does not revolve around your email inbox.
Discipline number 3, confession. But Cooper pushes back against the vague, generic apologies we usually offer. Just saying, sorry for my sins today, God, does nothing to change your behavior.
He suggests using the Ten Commandments as an active diagnostic tool. You go through them one by one at the end of the day. Did I steal today? Did I steal company time? Did I bear false witness? Did I gossip about my coworker?
It forces the ego to look directly at its precise mechanical failures.
Discipline number 4, reading. Specifically, aggressively managing your mental diet. Cooper frames this as the ratio between what you appropriate, which is what you consume, versus what you produce.
If you are consuming 4 hours of algorithmic internet trash, your mind will produce anxiety and noise.
You must force yourself to read classical, challenging, dense material. You have to build the internal payload for your stealth bomber.
And finally, discipline 5, fasting. This is perhaps the most direct assault on the ego. Fasting teaches the physical body self-discipline.
We live in a culture that believes every impulse must be immediately gratified. When you fast, your body screams at you. You get tired. You get irritable.
But you learn to say no to your own flesh. It is a visceral, biological reminder that you are not a god, that you are deeply dependent, and that your ego does not dictate reality.
If a person actually masters these 5 things, meditation, consecration, confession, reading, and fasting, does the noise of the internet just bounce off them? Does the culture stop affecting them entirely?
You still live in the world, you will still feel the friction, but these disciplines absolutely neutralize the capture. They break the spell.
Wow.
When you have spent the morning fasting and meditating on a 3,000-year-old text, a 15-second TikTok video designed to make you outraged about a political election completely loses its power.
These disciplines build a psychological and spiritual fortress that the algorithms simply do not have the code to breach.
Which brings us to the end of an incredibly dense journey today. Let's synthesize everything we've covered.
Yeah. The systems of the modern world, the internet algorithms, the hollow corporate entertainment, the reactionary political ideologies, they are all explicitly designed to turn you into an attention-captured lolcow.
They want you exhausted, outraged, and endlessly scrolling.
But by embracing true historical education, adopting the strategic foolishness of masking your ego, and grinding through ancient spiritual disciplines, you can actually achieve that elusive peace of the Holy Spirit Father Moses talked about.
But on this show, we don't just want to leave you with philosophy. Knowledge is only valuable when it is applied.
So we have 3 highly actionable, somewhat uncomfortable steps for you to take today. We want to push your buttons a little bit.
Step 1, the mediocrity mask challenge.
Sometime today, you are going to find yourself in a conversation or a mild argument where, for an absolute verifiable fact that you are right and the other person is wrong.
Your challenge is simple. Let them win.
Feign ignorance. Say, you make a good point. I haven't thought of it that way. Starve your ego of the desperate need to be the smartest person in the room. Just sit there. Watch how physically uncomfortable it makes you feel to not correct them, and realize how much power your ego has over you.
Step 2, audit your appropriation. Look at your phone's screen time data tonight. Confront the raw numbers. How many hours did you spend plugged into flow machines that numbed your brain?
We challenge you to take just 20 minutes of your daily doom scrolling time tomorrow and swap it for one of Dr. Cooper's disciplines. Sit in total silence and meditate on a single verse of scripture, or read a chapter of a book published before 1900. Reclaim that territory in your mind.
Step 3, audit your worldview. Take a brutal, honest look at your strongest political or social beliefs. Ask yourself, is your ideology actually dedicated to building something beautiful and lasting? Or is it entirely dependent on destroying an enemy?
If your sense of purpose requires someone else's destruction to function, you aren't fighting for truth. Your ego has simply hijacked the steering wheel.
We throw these challenges out there to provoke you, but we don't want you to just take our word for any of this. We highly encourage you to dive into the sources yourself.
Look up the historical context of the Council of Florence. Read Schopenhauer. Read Hosea. Make up your own mind.
And we want to hear from you. Drop down into the comments right now. Where in your own life are you recognizing the specific mechanics of attention capture, and what disciplines are you putting in place to fight back against it? Let's get the community talking.
If this deep dive helped clarify the noise for you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who feels overwhelmed by the cultural machine. It is the best way to support the show.
Before you go out into the world today, consider this one final thought.
If the wisest, most brilliant minds in human history realized that they could only survive by pretending to be fools in public, what does it say about our modern society, which demands that every actual fool be given a global microphone to broadcast their unearned truth? Keep your mask up, keep your payload heavy, and until tomorrow, keep diving deep.